All right, I just want to talk about this real quick. I think people are forgetting about this part about the Dogs. Georgia averaged more than 300 yards a game passing this past year. And let me take you through a little history lesson. I remember quite clearly in the about 5 years ago when the narrative about Georgia was that Kirby just wanted to run the ball and play defense. And there was a time when you had Justin Fields in the program, Jake Fromm, Nick. Well, those were not all at the same time, but I remember after the Tennessee game in 18, poor Chip. Chip Towers asked a question about it was Justin going to play more or was Jake Fromm going to play more or whatever. And it's funny now looking back on it, but Kirby said, Chip, the plan is there is no plan. Which is completely not true because Kirby Smart has a plan for everything, and I think he was just trying to figure it out at that moment what the next step would be. But during that time, in that first, I don't know, 50-ish, maybe 45 games that Kirby was there at Georgia, the notion popped up all the time that he only wanted to run the ball and play defense, and they were going to beat you like 20-7. No. Soon thereafter, he kept saying, I don't care how we score. And the fact of the matter is that it's true. They don't care how they score. They just want to score. I mean, that Carson Beck, this is going to be hard to say, but it's very possible. He's going to be Georgia's best throwing quarterback of Kirby's time so far. Because, he's a better thrower than Jake. He's more consistent than Jacob was. And then you had this mishmash of guys. Stetson was more of a dual threat guy. Whatever, you can say that's good or bad. I think that's good, frankly. But Stetson had a part of his game that was very hard to control. Stetson could throw it too, though. But like in terms of just like straight up chunking it, that's where Georgia's at right now with Carson. And I think people, Brock Bowers being Georgia's number one receiver over the last 3 years is kind of so fitting to fit in the stereotype for Georgia, which is, it's a tight end. Like, it's not even a receiver. It's not George Pickens in 21. It's not, Don Blaylock or, Ladd or AD or even Jermaine Burton back in the day. It's Brock Bowers, the tight end. So they're not serious about explosion. Okay. I mean, I don't know sometimes why folks choose to be misinformed. I might be talking about you, actually. I don't know why folks choose to be misinformed. The explosion from Georgia lately, in these last 2 years, sort of specifically, but you can include 21 in that as well. The explosion from the offenses has been pretty noticeable. For instance, total offense, Georgia this season, 496 yards. Do you know the other three teams? These are all teams known basically for their offense. Maybe not one of them. I'll let you pick one of them. LSU, Oregon, Oklahoma, Liberty. Which of those teams is known for being a complete team besides Georgia? Oregon. That's it. The other teams are just, about running up and down the field. Same basic teams, except you flip Liberty out for Southern Cal. And scoring offense in 2023, man, it's probably going to be, Georgia's still going to score a pile of points in 2024. So, last year, who are the top 5 teams in scoring offense? I'll give you a hint. Only one of them is the same as last year. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Only 2 of them are the same as last year. Do you know who these 2 are? SC and Georgia. That's right. LSU, gone. Oregon, gone. I can't remember who the other one was. Oklahoma, gone. No, they weren't in there. It was Tennessee, Ohio State, Southern California, Alabama, and Georgia. How about in 21? What was the story in 21? Georgia was top 10. They weren't top 5 that year. So they're the only team that has consistently been that good all the time. Ohio State for sure has been. They are not in the top 10 of scoring this season. They weren't what they were. And Georgia was never number 44 in the country like Ohio State was this past year. I'm going to give Ohio State a bit of a pass. I probably do that too often. But people are not realizing how explosive Georgia is. They're getting that part wrong all the time. They're not paying attention. They're not informing themselves. And if we're going to do anything on this channel, I'm going to tell you right now, y'all are going to get informed with reality. Now, it might not always be real pretty, but it is going to be, it is going to be the truth. And, Georgia has been very good on the offensive side of the ball with explosion. My big concern going into 24, if you want to call it, my biggest concern, I don't know that it's a big concern, but it's number one on my list. I do get concerned about the defensive line. Like, if I'm just being straight with y'all, they did pretty well this past season. I'll go back to the statistics because they don't lie. I mean, it's just what it is. In run, so let's just do scoring defense first. So Georgia dropped a little bit this past year to 5 in scoring defense. So not unbelievable. I said they dropped. They didn't drop. They were at 5 last year. They are painfully consistent. I mean, it must bother people. They're the only team that's top 5 in scoring defense these last 3 years. If I'm not mistaken, I'll double check that as we go here. But they have to be because I don't see Iowa on here. We know Clemson's not on here 3 times in a row. Clemson's changed. Do Big Ten teams get to combine? So no, they don't. So Georgia's the only team that has been top 5 in scoring defense these last, however many years. So these last 3 years. So a little bit of my, concern is overdone, quite frankly. Run defense for Georgia was not as good this last year as you would like it to be. All right? Giving up 114 yards a game. So that's a little high for them compared to what they've been in the recent past. In 22, this past season, now it's getting confusing. The second national championship season, they were the number 1 run defense in the country. The year before that, they were number 2. So it was noticeable, y'all, to go down to 18. All right? Now, that's not, it's not the end of the world, but it's about double it's not quite double what they've had these last couple years. So they're going to have to adjust that. Like the big young guys, they're going to have to adjust that. So the preconceived notions of Georgia, I'm looking at the board. The preconceived notions about the Dogs are not necessarily based in reality. Their strength may be more and more with explosion on offense than slowing you on defense in the run game. Now, their pass defense was elite this past year. And, when you look at the draft and you're looking at multiple guys that could go in the top 70, that's probably the reason why. That's a big deal. But I do think as good as people are getting, as much as people are missing on, they're the only team in the conference that threw for 300 yards a game. They're the only team in the conference that's explosive the way that, they are. That's not the way Alabama played this past year. They struggled on offense. I don't know if you remember that. They didn't score 30 against Georgia. So that wasn't exactly the 2020 Alabama team that was rolling through those curtains. So I also think, though, it has to be noted that one of the reasons why Alabama beat Georgia was that they ran enough. They didn't run a ton. One sort of skew in all of this is that, when Georgia played the Jackets as well as Auburn, both those teams rely heavily on the run, particularly Auburn. But, you're still allowed to stop them, and they didn't, And that Tech game would have been completely a blowout had Georgia contained them to like 120 yards. That didn't happen. And Tech, to their credit, ran enough. They didn't run enough to win the game. We saw that. But they ran enough. And sometimes, like the 2020 Florida game, if you run enough, that is enough to win because there's other ways to score. And I think that's what people get wrong and kind of forget about that aspect of Georgia is, man, they can really score, and they can really score fast, and they can bury you too. That's the other thing. They can bury you if you can't do at all anything on offense. We saw a lot of burials last year. during when Georgia kind of caught their breath. After from the fifth game of the season on, they were putting people in the grave. Kentucky, Tennessee, Ole Miss, the Gators. I mean, there were just games that just were not competitive. And then you had other games like Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt where Georgia mistakes specifically kept the other team in the game. The turnovers against the Jackets, one on the goal line, that'd have been a 17-point win. The turnovers against Vanderbilt, the injury to Brock Bowers against Vanderbilt, those things all combined. So it's of course everything in sports, but but when you look at those two things, I think that's what people are really kind of missing and getting wrong about the Dogs heading into 24.